He's a GOP strategist and a former Missouri state senator. We're also joined by Matthew Brodsky. He's a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. John, the CIA has reportedly concluded that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the murder or knew about the murder, but it has no smoking gun evidence. It's only circumstantial evidence. Now, the president doesn't want to derail Saudi-linked foreign policy based on the circumstantial evidence. He says it's not in America's interest or the regional interests. Is that a valid point from the president?
Well, yes, as your laid out, we have Saudi Arabia there as a huge ally for both Israel and the United States, and in our battle against the real nemesis, which is Iran, that wants destruction for both of us. So I'm not sure, if you're going to alienate an ally like that, it would be one thing if we had an American journalist who was an investigative journalist. Very clearly, this was a free press issue involving a U.S. citizen. But in this case, we have Saudis killing a Saudi that has a much more complicated background. He's been a political operative. He's currently working as a journalist. But it's far more complicated, and I don't think you alienate an ally like that. What is appropriate? This is new ground. We haven't had this before, and I think no matter what the President Trump does, some people will say it's just not enough. They'll accuse him no matter what he does.
Matthew, what do you think? The U.S. has taken some measures against the 17 Saudis involved in the murder here, but should the U.S. punish the Saudis in a harsher manner for this killing?
Look, I think the Trump administration should do not what the Obama administration did, and that's and that is what we should do is tell our allies when they have done things that we disagree with, tell it to them behind the scenes, and then you don't make the biggest stink about it in the entire world. Now, the fact is, what would have been helpful from Trump's statement today would have been something that would have indicated not that we may never know the truth. But the simple fact is, as he was trying to say, but almost got there, was the reality is Saudi Arabia is our ally. We're going to continue to have a working relationship with them. It's not a matter of whether we find out who was the person who made the phone call, who was the last person to sign off on it. And it's not a matter of all these other details that are being leaked out by Turkish and Qatari press. It's still a matter of the U.S. having to maintain relations with countries where we have a shared interest, and that's what it's about. Interests, not values.
John, Democrats and some Republicans are criticizing the president on this. They're saying that this does not put America first, that this puts the Saudis first. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think that was over the top. That was silly. This is clearly in United States' interest to maintain relationship with the Saudi regime. We have clear. I mean, there aren't many places where the enemy lines are so clearly drawn. They are our ally against the Iranian regime that is totally bent against us. So if we lose the Saudi regime, who loses more, we or them? But if we go to battle, I agree with your other guests that this is far more complicated.
Matt, it's certainly complicated, but how integral are the Saudis to the U.S.? The U.S. doesn't need them for oil anymore. They do need the Saudis to help control global oil prices. But now that the U.S. is energy independent, that's no longer a factor. So who needs who more here in this relationship? Could it be argued that the Saudis need the U.S. more?
Well,
sure.
Certainly
the Saudis need the United States more.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean...
Saudi Arabia needs the United States more than we need them. But, I mean, again, this isn't a schoolhouse type of, argument. It's that the point is that we still need each other. Who needs one more doesn't make as big of a difference. The bottom line is that, yes, we have been relying on Saudi Arabia to maintain the current oil market, to prevent it from crashing when we put in our sanctions back on Iran. So that is extremely important. But I think we need to bear in mind that they're one of the leaders of the Middle East. And when it's come to the years of Arab upheaval, even the the lines that used to be drawn between the traditional power centers in the Middle East, whether you're talking about Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Syria having tried to put in a bid for that in decades past. Where we are right now is Saudi Arabia is a leader, and we need to deal with them. Where they go, the Gulf Cooperation Council goes, and that's very important. It's also very important the relations that they've been cultivating with Israel right now. These are things that we don't just blow up because it seems that some on the left have suddenly figured out that the Middle East behaves in a different manner than we do in the West. There have been 500,000 killed in Syria, and not a word from these people from the previous administration who was okay with this while they boosted Iran throughout the region. Now suddenly someone who was a journalist and more, he gets killed, and this is a reason that we should toss aside all of our allies and jump back in the sack with Iran. Sorry, I'm not buying it, and I don't think most Americans should.
Yeah, you point out the double standard here, and it's valid. Matt, it's not just Democrats, though, that are criticizing the president. Some Republicans are also criticizing the president's response. And, John, at least 5 members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee have spoken out against this response. What kind of action can we expect from Congress?
You know, certainly with the divided Congress, there's going to be limited ability to do too much, and they can't do anything functionally. I don't see anything functionally happening. They might do some kind of resolution or you know, joint statement, but I really don't see anything dramatic coming out of Congress.
All right, John and Matt, we're going to continue this conversation on, well, actually, we'll continue this conversation right now, Matt. How would the Saudis react to tougher sanctions?
The idea that they could just suddenly bolt into China and Russia's camp is a bit overblown. They can't. Their weapon systems are for us. This would be a disaster for them. However, they could make things simply more difficult for us. They could tank the oil market. There's a lot of things that they can do, and I think it's most important that we are working on a plans that includes Saudi Arabia when it comes to Syria, which is another mess that we're trying to work out. So we want them to be actively involved. We want them to be financing projects.
Right.
So we need them on our side.
All right, we'll pick this up after the break. John and Matt, stick around. You're watching ClearCut. Welcome back. I'm Michelle Makori, and back to our top story. President Trump has strongly defended ties with Saudi Arabia, despite international condemnation of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Saudi Arabia has blamed the murder on rogue agents, denying claims that the Crown Prince had knowledge of the operation. Now, there are reports that the CIA believes that the murder could not have happened without Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's knowledge, but it does lack definitive evidence proving that he ordered this killing. For more, let's bring in our senior diplomatic correspondent, Nina Larson in Washington, D.C. Nina, thanks for being with us. Nina, the crux of the president's pushback against keeping ties with Saudi Arabia was both economic links to the U.S., but really very much the need to have the Saudis cooperate with a common enemy that is Iran. Tell us about that.
That's absolutely right. The reference to Iran was throughout this statement that we had earlier directly from the president, Michelle. And it was quite unlike any regular presidential statement, which are usually quite dry and staid. This was like an extended series of tweets, lots of exclamation marks. But he did point directly to Iran, and specifically Iran's activities in Yemen. And we all know that the Saudis have come under a great deal of scrutiny for their activities in Yemen. At the moment, the port of Hodeidah is surrounded by Saudi-led coalition troops there. They're in trouble at the UN at the moment for allegedly targeting civilian targets there in Yemen. But Trump has provided yet more cover for the Saudis by saying that essentially Saudi Arabia would be happy to pull out of Yemen. That was in the statement, saying that they would be happy to pull out if only Iran would leave. Now, Iran is backing the Houthi rebels there that are engaged in fighting the Saudi-led coalition. It's not clear if there are Iranian forces actually on the ground within Yemen, and the Iranians didn't cause this war. but they certainly are backing the Houthi rebels. But you're absolutely right. The common enemy in Iran between the US and Saudi Arabia is a very, very solid piece of US foreign policy at the moment, and an absolute priority for the administration.
Yeah, a big factor. Nina, thank you so much. Nina Lawson. Let's bring back my panel, John Loudon and Matthew Brodsky. Gentlemen, thanks for returning. Matthew, when you look at what we know from the CIA report, it seems as though the main premise is that the tightly controlled Gulf states that there is simply no such thing as a rogue operation, that the Crown Prince must have known about this or must have ordered it. And the CIA assessment was, from what we know, based on a phone call that was made by the Crown Prince's brother, Prince Khalid bin Salman. He allegedly called Khashoggi and encouraged him to go to the consulate. He said that he would be safe there. Now, allegedly, he made this call on the order of the Crown Prince. That hasn't been established yet. So we have the brother allegedly calling Khashoggi, urging him to go to the consulate. Now, there are reports that there are members in the Saudi establishment and in the ruling party there, the royals, that are saying that the line of succession should be reconsidered in line of this. It's a little convenient. Matt, what do you make of it?
Yeah, how predictable is this? And where are we seeing these stories generate from? They're coming from the Turkish media and from Qatari media. It's been reported in the Middle East Eye. It's Qatari run. If you're talking about the Turkish media, this is all run by Erdogan. They have a drip of information. Some of it is very true, but a lot of it is complete nonsense. And this is what they're continuing to do. This is why in our last segment I was saying we needed the president. Yeah.
But Matt, there are some that have argued that this whole very conspicuous killing could have been a plot by some in the Saudi establishment to frame the Crown Prince for the purposes of causing discord between him and the Trump administration. Many have objected to his reform agenda and his corruption crackdown that saw several of them holed up in the Ritz-Carlton. And there's also the agenda of getting someone else in the line of succession. So how does this fit into this theory? Because it does seem to be an interesting development that we heard that his brother made the phone call urging Khashoggi to go to the consulate.
Right. Here's how it all fits. It all fits in the category of, well, that's very interesting to know. And that's what the CIA, incidentally, does. They provide information and intelligence, not policy. That's up to the president. So all of these details, fine, that would be really good for the United States to know, but they don't change the fundamental issue, which is the United States bases its foreign policy on shared interests. So none of these details being filled in would really shift President Trump's attitude or position. It would just be another detail to fill in.
On the contrary, Matt, I would say that it actually bolsters the president's case, because taking stronger action would perhaps be playing into the hands of those that could have been involved here. Again, John, I want to bring you back into this conversation. You do have some senators like Marco Rubio making the point that it is, in fact, in the U.S. national interest to defend human rights, that violations lead to mass migration, they help extremism flourish, and they often result in new governments being hostile towards the U.S. because the U.S. supported their oppressors. Those are Rubio's words there. Does he have a point?
Oh, without a doubt, he has a point. And there are lots of deep and abiding principles here, like a free press, like being a shining city on a hill and not being seen and either involved in or in any way condoning these kind of barbarous acts. So, but again, as Matt said, at the end of the day, it comes down to what are we doing in response? What is the U.S. action and what is the U.S. interest? And there is so much at play politically and in business. You know, would they turn around and buy weapon systems from South Africa or something or planes that might have come from the U.S. and they're now coming from somewhere else? So we're having a fight with an ally over something that's more complicated than, say, the murder of Daniel Pearl. You have an American reporter journalist, lifelong journalist who's murdered. That's very different than a nation killing one of their own in this kind of cloak and dagger scenario.
John, appreciate your analysis. Matthew, good to have you with us. Thank you both so much.